Hi guys, welcome to Chessbase lesson with one and only international master Alex Astaneh Lopez, former Irish champion.
Hello, Nicola. Welcome today.
Hi guys. All right, I'm very excited because this is our second session, and the first session was a very good torture session. So I'm looking forward to more of the same.
Yeah. So, by the way, somebody
All
time
right.
to time just as it did the last stream. Did you have any issues when we were speaking? Did you hear that breaking up when we were speaking before going live, Nicola?
No, I did not. So, hey, Dr. Shalpe. All right. So, what did we do last time? I think you switched to the camera mic, and that worked fine.
So the thing about it is, this time I actually came prepared, but then I forgot to do so. We have a second Wi-Fi connection now, which has a
Wow.
much faster upload speed. So I could switch to it, but it's probably gonna
No,
kill the
actually,
connection.
actually, you're fine now. So let's keep plugging away. Guys in chat, if you Bunkinator, it's very good to see you. Welcome. I'm a shy guy. Thank you, Dr. Shalpe, for joining us. And we are, if you see any issues and I'll hear any issues, I'll let you know. Hey, Dirk, it's very good to see you. Thank you for arranging a match with Laura Unuk. Laura Unuk yesterday. I am already starting to prepare. She actually beat Goryachkina until Title Tuesday. I was very impressed. Anyway.
Nicola, by the way, sorry that I just realized there's another detail I forgot, which is I didn't put on my headphones. Are people hearing background noise?
I can't hear background noise, so I think we're fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Next, by the way, our next session, which will be next Friday, Alex and I are going to stream our technical preparation for the stream, which is probably going to be the most interesting part of the whole session.
Well, as the viewers can probably see, there have been very limited technical preparations, at least on my part. You've nailed everything.
Same here. All right, very good. So somebody's playing d4 here?
Yes, correct. Right. So the last lesson that we had done, or the first lesson, we were talking about like we had taken one game. Let me just load this game, and it has been a very interesting game against the FIDE master, but he was only around 2100 at the time. I had the black pieces, and we had spent a long time talking about sort of opening preparation, the logic behind choosing, sharp lines like bishop to g4 here, when you believe that your opponent doesn't really know what he's doing in the opening, trying to immediately, even from the black side, if you are the higher rated player.
By the way, you broke up a little bit again. I don't know why.
How painful would it be for you from a technical point of view if I switch connection?
I'm not sure it's the connection, to be honest with you. Your camera is completely stable. It's which microphone are you using?
Okay, let me switch microphone first before
let's do that.
The other stuff.
Hey, Juho, it's very good to see you. And hello, Samit. It's very good to see you in this channel. Welcome. And Far Eastern, it's always a pleasure to see you. Good morning. So it's all right.
Okay. So hello to everyone. Now I have the other microphone.
Yeah, I think that's better actually. Yeah. Hey, Dr. Lono, it's very good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I know this is fairly late for you, so thank you. All right, so we were discussing this position in.
So sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, my bad.
No. So the last time basically we had spoken about this particular game and this particular decision to play the bishop out and put white to a difficult decision. Then we get this different pawn structure. And then we highlighted a couple of critical moments. We talked, for example, about pawn takes on c4, where the main takeaway is usually when your opponent has the bishop pair, you don't want to open up the position. That's number one. And second of all, you usually don't want to give up a central pawn for still a central, but more of a flank pawn. I mean, it's less central. So you usually don't want to do this. But the rules change in this instance because we've got the king right here in the middle of the board. And with this this pawn that could be on the G file, instead it's on the F file. It actually went from here all the way up like that. The king side is kind of weak, and in the absence of that C pawn, which we just took off, the queen side is kind of weak. So there's a sort of long-term question about where the king is going to go, hence why opening up the position made sense. Then we spoke about this position here, which was super interesting. I grabbed the pawn because, you know, in the face of greed, it's very difficult to resist this temptation. However, it turned out that there was a beautiful idea here, a beautiful move that's hard to find because it requires you going against a lot of your conditioning. Do you recall what that move was, Nicola?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, the move, and actually I didn't look in this position, that move was to, actually I forgot, to be honest with you.
So it was a pawn break.
Yeah, it was a pawn break. It was E5.
So it was,
well, G5,
E5.
Sorry, G5.
G5, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember the position now. Yep.
Yeah.
And this is to follow up on what you just said. You're pushing a pawn in front of your king, and it's very counterintuitive from a standpoint of any classical knowledge of chess, but it's really the best move in the position.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it's counterintuitive to A, push in front of your king, and B, especially when you play this move, do you weaken mainly your dark or your light squares?
Well, you're opening a whole complex of light squares, like H5, you know, and potentially F5, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the rule of thumb sort of being that when you have a pawn on a light square, you shift it to a dark square. You're compromising the two diagonals that the pawn intersects. So in this case, this diagonal right here,
yep,
and this diagonal right here. Usually you don't want to do that when your opponent is the side with the light square bishop and you don't have that piece. But in this instance, what counters it is the fact that you want to get at the king, and importantly, you want to break down this strong central pawn structure and take advantage of the badly placed white pieces.
Yep.
The queen is being x-rayed and it's undefended, and the bishop is also being x-rayed. So we talked a lot about this moment and these kind of combinations, which are funky, but they work because after you take, we can go bishop takes, and that rook is hit, as well as the queen. And if on the other hand, you play some defensive move, let's say, I don't know, something like rook d1, then we take, and you cannot take back again because of that undefended piece. And we talked a bunch about how undefended pieces are often the sort of the reason, or loose pieces are the reason behind the player's demise, let's say. Yes. So that was more or less what we talked about. And then there were a couple more moments, nothing too crazy. And in the end, we also discussed very briefly this particular endgame, which is actually a draw.
Yep.
And I just want to tie up, before we move on to the second game, I want to sort of tie up this endgame here.
Okay.
Which is that there's two reasons why, let's say, I mean, I didn't realize that this was a draw going into it, but it turns out that these pawns, because they're not connected, are very, very difficult for black to sort of, you cannot connect them, and therefore you cannot win the game if white defends correctly. So for example, if I play the move f5 here and I connect the pawns, what would you do as white?
You would just I would give a check on a6 and collect the pawn on f5.
Yeah, exactly, right? So you give the check, king moves somewhere, and then you just take that pawn, and this pawn is not sufficient. So what would happen if I just push the pawn?
I can actually play king, I'm pretty sure I can play king f4 here and keep going. My king is basically blocking, white king is blocking the black king, and white rook is much more active, and then at some point I'm going to attack the pawn, and you can only push it so far. There is no way you can promote.
So what would be your specific move?
I would play king f4.
King f4, and then let's see. Can I?
Good.
Can I
Alex didn't say that's a losing move. That's that's nice.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you're
king f3.
Yeah, king f3 or something like that is good. Even here is quite cute, just behind the pawn. But yeah, king f3. I'll have to grant you that that is absolutely correct.
Yes.
Okay, so let me just configure one more thing here.
Okay, very good.
Good.
And guys, just FYI, we actually encourage chat participation. So if you have an idea or if you want to post moves in chat, feel free to do so. I'm going to do my best to not look at them, but it's the idea. Actually, Mad One, thank you for the follow. That's very greatly appreciated. Thank you. Thanks. All right.
So in this position, what I went for as a tricky move here.
But you won this position, right?
So I won this position, and I actually thought I was still pretty confident here, because I had one idea.
Good morning, Renaissance Sombra. It's very good to see you, and thank you, Timmy19. I appreciate that. So this is, this is actually something I don't know how to do, which is how to be tricky in an endgame. So what's the tricky idea? If I'm black, I think pushing e3 here might be useful, because then it makes it more difficult to capture this pawn, because as long as the pawn remains on f6, that's a one endgame after the capture. So I would play e3.
Okay, so e3, and I go, let's say, rook a3.
Okay, and I don't have a really good tempo move, but I can play e2.
e2, king f3.
Very good. King f5. Or no, king g5.
King g5, okay. And rook a2.
Okay, I am gonna play. The question here is, what's the best way to make progress here? I can keep the rook where it is, and let's say I play king. I want to play f5. I can play king f5.
King f5.
Then you give me a check, and I need to go back, and I haven't achieved much, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm actually curious how you won this position against a very strong player.
So the idea to create some problems is, the winning plan is to connect your two pawns. If you can do that, and so think about how to maybe drive for a different configuration. Let's say you had two moves with the rook, for example. What would you prefer?
Actually, Samit, who is a very strong player, suggests rook. His stuff. So yes.
Yeah, Samit is playing the most practically challenging move, rook h1.
Okay.
And so, Nicola, tell me, what is the point behind this move?
Well, the point is that if any capture of the pawn results in a lost endgame for white, so white cannot take. And
correct.
And if we can play something along the lines of rook, can we play rook h4, give a check? Maybe king rook h4, king g, but that's the king g3, and it's not immediately obvious. I still like the plan though.
So Nicola, by the way, is just for the viewers, is noting very quickly that this pawn cannot be captured with either piece. If you capture it with the king, goodbye to the rook, and the more important one is rook takes e4, and the point is here, rook h4 check, and what Nicola is saying we can just take the rook, and this is a win. And what's very important there is actually the important point for any viewers is that king and pawn endgames and a really solid knowledge of that is the foundation for good endgame play across all other types of endgames, because a lot of the time as well you have these transitions from a rook and pawn endgame to a king and pawn endgame. So if you don't know your king and pawn endgames well and you study rook and pawn endgames, it's kind of the wrong order to study it in. Because here you can only find the right solution if you know.
Yeah, that's the one position. And just a very quick shout out to one and only Lila Kuridze. Thank you, Lila, for joining us. Lila is a great streamer and a great friend. Please give her a follow. Also, thank you, Hedgehog1963, for subscription for 8 months. Also, Hedgehog1963 deserves a huge debt of gratitude from me because he is the one who is largely responsible for the YouTube channel. So if to see his work and follow YouTube channel, I just put a link to my YouTube channel. That's where I actually post all the streams. So anyway, if you give that a follow, that would be greatly appreciated. Yeah, so this is one because we have captured the key square in front of the pawn, which is, if I remember correctly, are g4, f4, and e. And white cannot prevent black king from grabbing one of these. If we manage to play king g4, we are winning. And
yeah, right, exactly. So how we solve these is a thing called key square theory, which we've covered before or touched upon, although I think you were already perfectly familiar with it before we started any work. And basically, the white king's task is to prevent the black king from entering one of these key squares. Otherwise, we know for a fact that regardless of whose move it is, it's going to be a win for black. So white here can only prevent access for one more move by going here, but then after king f5, we use the opposition to force the king to sort of shimmy one way or another, and key square is arrived at, game over.
Thank you, Logistan, for the sub. Very greatly appreciated. So that's lost. Okay, so that's this is the game continuation, right?
Right, exactly. So rook h1. So now the question is, how do you defend as white?
It's a good question. Okay, so the candidate move is rook a5, which basically cuts off the black king. I don't want to play king g4 because that will give you, that basically wins the game by f5, and I don't have a tempo. So I would play rook a5 here.
Right, so rook a5 is losing.
Oh, okay.
So we're really getting into the swing of things, Nicola, right?
Why do all people that study with me enjoy to torture me like this? It's a mystery to be seen. Okay, thanks, Alex. So rook a5 is losing. So all right. So the best move then is what?
Rook a6 is also losing. Samith is suggesting rook a6 in the chat. It's a tough one, right? It's a very tough one.
All right. So what are the other candidate moves? And by the way, I was just going for candidate moves. I didn't really play rook a5. Haha. So we need to maintain this blockade. Basically, if we allow you to push f5, we are lost. And rook a6 is also losing. What is the other option? The other option is, if I play, I dismiss king g4, because you play f5, king f4, but that actually may work.
So,
okay, that's another option. Rook a8 is also another option to kind of give your king a push from. Well, if we move the rook right somewhere, we are threatening to capture the pawn. Okay. And you're saying rook a5 is losing. Okay.
Yeah.
I obviously believe you. It's all right. So let's play rook a. Let's consider rook a8.
So let's first discuss actually why rook a5 and rook a6 both lose, because I think it's quite instructive.
Yeah, because I don't see it, to be quite frank with you.
So the first one is, let's say rook a5. We go for the configuration we want, which is rook check, right?
Yeah.
If, let's say, the king goes back, now after f5, we're going to get a win because we're just going to put our king here and we're going to start pushing the pawns. The pawns are connected. Basically, all the pieces are well coordinated all of a sudden.
That's an easy win.
Right. So white has this move that destabilizes.
Yeah.
Because now the rook, I mean, if if the pawn was here, let's say one more forward or whatever, the pawns were shifted, then the rook could move and it would be fine. But here, the way that black wins is by using the bad placement of the rook here on a5. So
which is
we gain a
basically rook
tempo.
h5, right?
Exactly, right? All king and pawn endgames are going to be lost. White has to move the rook somewhere.
Yeah, and then
Doesn't
king
really matter
g5
where.
and f5, and that's game over. Okay, I understand the.
And then f5, exactly.
Yeah,
if the king steps back, now we've got this check and we sort of dislodge. So the rook on a5 loses because of this one detail.
Okay. And that actually applies to any rook move.
Well, not quite, because rook on a6, we don't have this check and rook here.
Yeah, we don't have the threat. So here we can play this.
We can play it. King goes to g3, but nevertheless, this position is winning.
Okay, so the idea here is, I guess, to play rook h5, or is it? So we can play rook h5 and then rook e5, right?
Well, let's try and make as much progress as possible, get as well coordinated as possible, and keep in mind transitions to king and pawn endgames.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we cannot play king g5 because you're going to take on f6, and we have a rook that's being attacked.
Okay, but let's follow that line. King g5, rook takes.
Okay, so king g5, rook f6, just thinking loud. Rook g4. And that's what's winning. I understand. Okay.
Well, let's say king g5, rook takes f6, king takes f6, king takes h4. How would you continue that line?
Yeah, that's lost because king e5 and so on. Yeah, so it's king g5 is the move, and
yes.
We are the end game is that. Okay.
Yeah. So this is also winning, but we can just directly take, and the point is this route here allows us to push the pawn home. It's not so obvious. You get this position, and then after king e1, you just you can go here, and life is good.
All right. So basically, rook a6 is also losing because
you have this option.
Yeah.
And so the question is this: let's say that I went for this setup. With the rook on a6, it turns out this is not useful for us. It turns out this check is not useful either because we go f5, and if you take, king takes, king f4. But where in this setup would we want our rook to be if we were white?
On a8.
Exactly, right? So I'm homeless on Wi-Fi. Kudos to him getting that right, because then we would have this move, this check, and the rook would fall.
Yeah.
So it's because of that white's only defense is rook a8.
Okay.
And then rook h4 check, king g3, and the point is now we don't have this move king g5. We'd actually lose this as black because the rook falls. And what can we do? We can go something like rook h5, but we don't have that tempo on the rook, so white can
repeat
step forward. can step forward. And even if we go rook e5 and we get this setup, it turns out that this position is also not a win. You just go rook a2, and if you try to push, you can actually just straight up block the pawn. And what's incredible about this position is that, let's say that I go, I don't know, let's say I go rook e8, something like that. How do you draw this?
I can't take for the reason we have already seen. Yeah. Can I play king g4? I can, right?
So king g4, I have one move that wins.
Which is what? F5?
Well, f5 is tricky because then king goes to f3, let's say, and I may be able to take the, or king, yeah, maybe f5 also is actually a big problem. But there's a cleaner option.
Cleaner option, okay.
To make progress.
Good question. Okay. All right, so f5 is not the move. Cleaner option is what? To play... I actually don't see it, unfortunately. Okay. If I move the rook...
So here,
I mean, this position, okay.
Position,
444, thank you for this. Gotcha.
Sorry?
Okay. No, I'm here. All right, so we're gonna play rook e4.
Right, exactly. Rook e4, king f3.
Yeah. And then king f5.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this would be a problem.
Yeah.
And so in this position here, if I just sit and wait, though, the problem for black is that white has a move here that just draws.
Okay. Rook g2.
Right, exactly. Rook g2 check, kick the king back, and then go back to e2.
Yeah.
So he cannot take the pawn immediately because it's a winning king and pawn endgame, but he can do that. So therefore, we cannot just sit and wait with rook e8. I could give this check, for example. Will you take the pawn?
No, it's still the lost endgame.
The same thing. But if you just go here, I mean, I can't make progress. If I go king g5, I actually will lose the game.
Yeah.
This would be, everything would win for black here. King g5 would win if not for this crushing rook g2.
Yeah, the small problem.
Yeah. And even, I mean, I can try to just trick you in some way. For example, after here, I could try rook g5. Sorry. I could try rook g5, hoping once again that you just take the pawn. But the problem is...
Yeah, there is king f4, and we haven't made any progress.
Yeah, I'm threatening this move. You need to stop it, but king f4 or king f3 will do it. So you have this really bizarre setup where there's no way to push the advantage home. And yeah, so after king f4, rook e5, rook a2, e3, rook e2, and that would have been a draw. Well, in fact, my opponent, he actually played rook a6 here, which is of course, unfortunate. Fortunate for me, unfortunate for him, but it was a very tricky endgame, and keep in mind the opponent, he was actually like 71 years old to hour 4 or 5 of the game, so like it's a horrible situation to have to defend this and calculate these things.
Taking unless advantage of the elderly, Alex. Come on.
I mean, okay.
No, this is an incredibly tricky endgame with basically 5 pieces on the board. Jesus. Okay. All right. So the takeaway from this is that even 2 pawns, the stronger side needs to make sure that they're not blocked.
Yeah, these pawns like this actually, disconnected pawns give some serious problems because you can get a blockade on these dark squares.
Okay.
So that was sort of the loose end from this last game. And for today's session, the fresh blood is, well, we'll see how many games we can cover.
Okay.
But this one I gave a headline that it's a story of psychology, calculation, and preparation. So those are the themes we're going to sort of explore in this game.
Oh, I'm homeless on Wi-Fi. Is wondering how Astaneh plays at age 71. So.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm still breathing at age 71, I don't know what my chess is going to look like, but I very much doubt it'll be of the quality of my opponent. You know, it's a very, very, very strong. I mean, it's impressive to keep like something like 2150 FIDE at age into your 70s. Yeah, okay, so in this game I was actually playing a super strong Romanian grandmaster called Mircea Harligras, who is also a streamer, so some people may be aware of him. And I sort of want to talk about those three pillars: psychology, opening preparation, and calculation. So first of all, my opponent, he's so solid with both white and black. And when I was preparing for him, I found it very challenging to find any line whatsoever that gave for an advantage. And that's one of the key differences that we're going to see when we look at other games. When we look at when we face 21, 22, 23, even 2,400 players, we see a big difference in terms of carving out advantages with the white pieces. Usually quite straightforward against 21, 2,200 players. And against 2,600 plus players, it's almost mission impossible.
Yeah. Just a quick shout out and many thanks to my dear friend Joe Bruin. Thank you for raiding with a party of 50. Welcome, raiders. This is a recurrent sessions, chess-based lessons with international master, one and only Alex Astaneh Lopez. We are looking at the game played as white by Grandmaster Mircea Harligras. And this is happening every Friday at 6 a.m. New York time. So welcome, raiders. It's very good to see you. Hey, Chess Lions. It's good to see you here. Hey, my namesake, Nicholas Days. It's good. And hey, Azerti GG. That's very good to see you. And Nicholas Dice is saying, interesting, Astaneh is streaming on a channel other than his own. What a surprise. Haha. Yeah, I think, Alex, the takeaway from that statement is that you should stream more. But, well, anyway.
I think that Nicholas, I know Nicholas, and I think the spirit, the essence of his comment is that I'm a stream parasite. You know, I go on to other people's streams here, and Fiona, of course, aka Fionketta. I'm mostly streaming on her channel, so I think Nicholas is burning me. But there might be an element of what you're saying as well.
Well, to be quite frank, and I hope Fiona can't hear me, is I think Fiona is getting the better of that deal, but we don't need to go there today. And I'm getting the better out of that deal. Anyway. All right.
So basically to return to this position here, bishop goes to g5.
Okay. And
it's so impressive how good these damn players are that, you know, Harligras, he plays pawn takes c4. And what's really interesting about this is in his previous games, he had gone for some alternative lines, and I had done some preparation. And I played bishop g5, and I could tell, like, just from his body language, he knew, okay, this guy, he's done some prep against me. He knows he's coming ready against the main lines. And he goes for line number, by popularity, line number 6, right?
Wow.
And this is such a nice trick that the top grandmasters, like super strong grandmasters, have. Sure. I mean, they have such breadth of opening knowledge that preparing against them is a nightmare, right? I mean, there's a story there. I don't know if people know, but there's a story. I think Svidler has told this among probably many others. who said the best player that you can get paired against in a super tournament is Ivanchuk with the black pieces. When you have black, you want to be paired against Ivanchuk on the next round. And the reason is because then you don't have to do any preparation. Then you can just take it easy, go for a swim, go for a walk or something, because he says it's absolutely impossible to guess what he's going to play. So unless you want to prep absolutely everything, then there's no point. And against these top guys, one of the big things that they do to survive is they just play incredible depth. So they say, yeah, we're living in the era of computers. Absolutely, you can prep some nasty stuff. But where I'm going to stretch you is I'm going to stretch you in terms of memory, time and memory. Yeah. Right? Are you going to be able to remember all your theory? Are you going to be able to put in the hours to catch me out? And so he hits with d takes c4, which incidentally is also the top Lila and Stockfish 12 move. And now I go knight c3, bishop b4, e4, and black plays h6 here.
Yeah,
and he's playing everything.
I've seen this. I've actually seen this. I think there was a time when actually of all people Alexander Botez was playing this line, and it's pretty wild. It can get pretty wild.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, this game was played between myself and Pardigras in early 2019. And I know Ding Liren and Magnus Carlsen, they must have seen that model game because they actually played it 1 month later. Ding and Magnus disputed this line. So I'd like to think that there was a connection there.
Well, there's definitely a connection. God, no, they review all the games. And I was actually impressed in the new version of Chessbase. Believe it or not, the new databases include Title Tuesday games. I was, wow, okay. I guess anyway. I guess there is a little bit of a shortage of tournaments due to obvious reasons, but every single game for Title Tuesdays was in the database.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
It
These
makes
days,
perfect sense.
There's some nice ideas there.
Okay.
So he plays like this anyway. And this line, I mean, it's good that you have seen it before. It's actually very trendy. It's been played a lot at the highest levels. Mike Zublu in particular has been playing this line a bunch. And so, but the problem was that here, I kind of knew, yes, this is a line, but I had forgotten the specific theory. And now we're going to soon approach this element of psychology, right? Because I'm the one that's a little rattled, and he's there, of course, he's super chill, super happy, because he knows now that he has avoided all my prep, and he's the one with the psychological upper hand, right? So c5, and I go ahead and I castle. C takes d4. And in this position, I have to make a tricky decision, whether to push e5 or to go knight b5. I go knight b5.
Okay.
And this threat of knight to c7 check. And he instantly plays queen e7. So I know he's still in theory. I take the pawn, what else? And he instantly castles. Now, here's my question to you. What is the first move that should be considered here?
All right, good question. And just while I'm thinking about it, one quick observation. It happens to me all the time, especially in my adoption matches, that stronger players, grandmasters, or play or any titled player will play objectively worse move just to take you off the prep. Heck, happened to me last week against Danny Wrench. It was pretty obvious that I have preparation for every single opening he normally plays, and then he started playing objectively worse moves just to throw me off successfully. It's a great match strategy. All right, so what do
we... successfully? I saw that first Sicilian dragon game.
I think it's more the case of me, as you always mention, me underestimating my opponent's options than actual game. I mean, I was completely winning until like last 3 moves of that game. But anyway, it happens. All right, so this bishop is a little questionable. The question here is what is black? I mean, white has a huge advantage in development in this position. It also, I mean, pawn structures are about the equivalent. This bishop on b4 is a little bit off base. So the question here is, white has a slight advantage to, but that's a very perishable advantage. All right, so the candidate move is to play e5 and try to create an outpost on d6.
Right, so e5 definitely super, very, very natural move. But the first move we should consider, if we're looking at checks or captures or threats.
Yeah, okay, so we don't have any meaningful check unless we can't take on g7 with the queen. We don't really have a meaningful capture that I can tell.
We have one.
Hmm?
We have one.
We have capture on e6, which is...
Capture on e6 would lose because bishop takes e6.
Yep.
But we've got one more.
We can capture the pawn on a7,
right,
which is actually worth a consideration.
Yeah. So what problems might there be with taking on a7?
Well, bishop c5, and we lose the knight.
Bishop c5. Do we lose the knight?
We don't. Okay, so then I'm missing something. Wow, it's actually quite tricky. I see. All right, so we take on a7, bishop c5, we take on c8.
Yeah, right. This little circuit here is very nice.
That's interesting. Okay, very good.
So therefore, the question then is, wait a second. Did my opponent just play everything instantly to the point where he's now losing a pawn?
I highly doubt it. And just a quick shout out to one and only Alessia Santeramo, who just raided us with a party of 122. Thank you, Raiders. Thank you, Alessia. It's always very good to see you. Alessia and I have Alessia and I will play hopefully 5 bullet matches on December 6th, and you know, she's gonna try to adopt me. She get 5 chances in bullet. And also Alessia is playing currently the Italian championship, and she is doing very well. She needs to qualify for the finals. So I wish Alessia very good luck in her tournament, and she is a dear friend of the channel. Give her a follow if you already haven't. Welcome, Raiders. I'm Nicola, and this is my dear friend and coach Alex Astaneh Lopez. We are doing chess-based lessons, and this is a weekly stream on my channel. So thank you for joining us, and good luck to Alessia today. Today is the crucial moment of the tournament. She needs to qualify. I'm 100% certain that she will qualify, so I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, welcome, Raiders, and thank you for the cheer and the follow, Magnus No Carlson. That's very greatly appreciated. We're also 15 followers away from 2,500 followers, which point we're gonna have some fun stuff. Sorry, Alex. So yes, so you're playing Parligras, so it's highly doubtful that he would blunder a pawn like this, right? So there is a trick here that he probably have in store. So instead of bishop c5, he can play queen c5, right?
But then how would you continue that line?
Well, we can exchange, and then I take on c8, and I am perfectly fine. All right, so there is something else that he prepared. You said he played this instantaneously, right?
Yeah. At this point, it's very clear he's still in prep.
Okay. And you took on a7.
I did not take on a7.
No, okay. All right, so what is interesting here? Oh, and Glarbuk, thank you for the follow. Laid Simaletra, thank you for the follow. And Doug the Boss, thank you again for the follow. Very greatly appreciated. Thank you, guys. All right, so what is the best move in this position for black? Why we can't take on a7? All right, so we take on a7. And bishop c5 doesn't work. But we can play, for example, something on the line of, we can interject rook d8.
So you're going to be really, really angry with me here, Nicola, when I tell you the solution, the answer.
God, okay. All right, yes.
Here's the thing.
I'm being trolled, guys.
There is actually no tactical problem with knight takes a7.
Okay.
You can absolutely take this pawn. In fact, it's probably the best move in the position.
Okay.
But it turns out that this line is absolutely fine to play for black as well. So the question becomes, why is this okay to play, even though you don't get back your pawn?
Okay, we get the rook on the a file. That knight is displaced. We get a few tempi to complete the development. Thank you, AGG, for the follow, and thank you, Sick Dandy, for the follow. That's very greatly appreciated. Thank you, guys. All right, so what's the best continuation? We can play bishop d8, bishop d7. We can play rook d8.
All right, so when we're solving for our opponent, we're using the same methods, right? Which is checks, captures, threats. Do we have any checks?
For a black, no.
Right. Do we have any captures?
Well, we can capture an a7.
Right. So we should consider this. Eventually, we would probably rule it out because after queen takes, we might look at a move like knight c6 or bishop c5. But the queen escapes and we're down in exchange.
Yeah, we don't have the compensation.
Then we would look for threats. We look for the highest order of threat we can come up with. So that's going to be something against the queen. So what are the candidates there?
Candidate there is to play rook d8. That's actually the obvious candidate move, because the queen needs to stay on this g1, a7 diagonal to defend the knight.
Yeah, so this rook d8 makes a lot of sense. The problem with rook d8 is we then look for checks, captures, threats for our opponent. What would be the capture that he has? He has no checks.
For white?
Yes, after rook d8.
Well, he can capture, on that capturing on c8 has been a motive throughout, and that's actually a really good move in this position.
Yeah, it turns out that we have to play rook takes c8. So before we're looking into something like this, which is unlikely to work, move the rook once, then move it twice. Let's look at other ways we can target the queen.
Well, there is this famous bishop c5 move.
Yes, bishop c5, right? Now that actually makes the most sense. It attacks both pieces, forces white's hand to play one.
Knight c8.
Knight takes c8, otherwise you lose a piece. Rook takes c8. And in this position now, white has to move the queen. And the kind of move that feels like white is going to have to play is what? Queen to where?
Queen to d3.
Queen to d3, because otherwise, if you put the queen, let's say, somewhere else, like you're here,
there's bishop f2, rook c4, and it's all dandy for black.
Yeah, you have to contend with this. Actually, it's not quite the full story, because the rook here, there will be no f pawn. In the end of the variation, there'll be a double attack for white available, which is what?
Actually, I lost you for a second. I'm sorry.
So if let's say if I go queen d2, you take this pawn, rook takes, and I take here, white has a move that can attack two things at once.
Okay, after rook c4.
Yeah.
Right. Hold on a second. Oh, there is knight e5.
Yeah, 95 and the line continues. But that's actually a little insight into my post-game analysis that I considered. I studied whether one of these two moves
Would work.
was better than the other, gave more chances. Um, Spoiler is that both of them are basically equal. Um, but it's interesting the extent of preparation of some players. For example, this move was played by John Ludwig Hammer
Oh, wow. Okay.
a number of years ago, and he won a game against a very strong grandmaster, Yannick Pelletier. So he may have looked at this and, well, Pelletier did not take this pawn. Instead, Pelletier, he went knight to c6.
Yeah.
And then after rook c1, white eventually ground Pelletier down. Although the position is objectively equal, the queen on d2 is slightly better placed than on d3 because it doesn't have, so many hits, coordinates better.
I hear you. Okay.
But nowadays, nobody is playing like this at the top level because they all have super strong computers, and they'll just remember that you can take all of this, knight e5, you can take here, knight takes f7, and it turns out that this position is fine for black. He lost the pawn on f7, but the knight is finding it a little bit tricky to get back into the game, and black's coordination is quite good. That's how chess is played at the high levels in 2020. But when Hammer beat Pelletier, it was 2010, and computers were very different back then. Yeah. Preparation was different, and so Hammer managed to squeeze a win. But nowadays, top players, they know that this position is just objectively equal. And the question for you, Nicola, is why is this position fine for black, even though he's down a pawn?
Okay, and just a quick shout out to people who have just joined us. Welcome, guys. This is a Chessbase lesson with one and only international master Alex Astaneh Lopez. We are doing this every Friday at 6 a.m. New York time. You know, the one motive that makes this into equal position is this rook exerts pressure on a file. On a8. Second, the white queen is a little bit unsettled because it needs to defend that bishop on c4. It's in most of the variations. You would think that symmetrical pawn structure, that wouldn't be enough for equality, but it is, actually.
Well, there's two details.
Yeah.
Like the essence of this position. And a third one would be what you hit at, which is that the white pieces are a little shaky, a little uncoordinated.
Yeah.
So, we see the queen is maybe a bit shaky, can be hit a bunch of times. That's definitely a factor. Pawn on f2 can be a little shaky. There can be some combinations like this. Knight b4 ideas can also gang up here or here. There's a lot of open files or semi-open files in black's favor.
Yep.
So all of that piece activity definitely factors, but the essence of why black can hold this position is the presence of one strategic sort of feature of the position. What is that? What's the one thing that stands out?
The pressure on the C file? We're talking about tactical motives on f2.
No, strategic motives, strategic detail here. What am I
highlighting? Okay. Now you're talking about opposite color bishops. Okay.
Yeah, the opposite colored bishops give so many drawing chances. And on top of that, these knights right here, if we keep them on the board, white could hope to keep chances alive by going for what trade? What would you want to do? If you were white and I had a couple of moves to trade off one piece for another, what would I do?
I would try to exchange the knight for the bishop.
Right, exactly. If you could do this, then you're up a pawn. Yeah, you're up a pawn. You've got knight versus bishop, plenty of winning chances.
Yeah.
If you're black, on the other hand, what do you want to do?
Well, you want to keep exerting pressures, and you obviously strategically want to not allow the bishop exchange.
No, in fact, you would be happy to exchange this knight for this other knight.
You want to exchange knights, yes, which are same color. Right now.
And there comes into play the second feature of the position, which is that there is one square in the center, that black has a really good grip of. What is that square?
D5.
Well, D5 he has a really great grip of with the pawns, but white also has a grip.
Yeah, no, we're talking about the piece control of D4 and E5 as well.
Yeah, excellent. So, in fact, if you notice, black has an advantage in the center. It looks at first sight like white has an advantage. Oh, I have a pawn here in the ideal center, and you don't. But actually, if we look at the control of these four squares, both sides have D5 on lockdown. The E4 pawn, it doesn't really matter that you've got that square. Black isn't really looking for that square. He can't use it with his bishop or with his knight. He doesn't need that square. Black's whole strategy is around the dark squares, and he is dominating those squares. So he has overall better control of the center. And he combines these two details, the bishop, opposite color bishops, with the control of the center. Yeah. So what happens is white has to step away with the queen. And what black has done here, for example, is rook d8, rook goes here, and now a move like knight to d4.
D4, and we have achieved the strategic goal, which is we exchanged the knights.
Yes, exactly. And here,
that's, sorry. This is now, this looks definitely more of a draw than it looked a move ago, or two ago. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the top guys, they know, they simply have studied these positions and they know that they can hold that one. It's really quite interesting to know that, for example, in some Blitz tournament in Abidjan, Grand Chess Tour Blitz, 1 month after our game, this game here was played. This was between Ding and Magnus. Magnus had the black pieces, and he actually played somewhat unconventionally, but still, he eventually got in knight d4, and
that's
posted to the draw.
Yeah.
So one of the stories, by the way, is that when we study openings like this, by examining like games and understanding like why can you sacrifice a pawn, etc. That's why a lot of grandmasters they hate the question of they hate this comment of that a lot of players say, which is, and I get this question as well, or this comment from like potential students. They say to me, I'm 1800 FIDE or something like that. I love chess tactics. I love maybe even studying endgames, but I really don't want to study the opening because I don't want to learn I don't want to just memorize a bunch of opening theory. And actually, grandmasters, most of their focus is not on memorizing opening theory, but rather it's on deeply understanding positions like these. And so whenever this question has been raised by really strong grandmasters, they kind of consider it a similar question to this one of how far do you calculate in a chess position? And they all say, well, that's a silly question because it just really depends on the position. When they say, when people say, I don't want to study openings because I don't want to just memorize stuff, and that's what openings are, they'll say that's not what openings are. What opening study is, if done properly, is this kind of thing. Of course, you'll end up knowing the lines, like knight takes a7 is a theory line, but it's all about understanding it.
The understanding the zen of the position, and it happens to me quite frequently, in which I have just acquired the opening, I have studied the lines, but I still don't understand the zen of the position of the opening that comes with playing multiple games, and it's different level of knowledge. Then I completely understand that.
And it's funny, Magnus played that game against Ding, right, in 2019, and then if we fast forward to 2020 in August, so only 3 months ago, now Ding had the black pieces and he played this position, and this is how the game went. Rook d8, queen e2, knight d4. I've never seen this game before because it's so fresh. But look, like we can without. I mean, if I said to you, how do you think this game is going to unfold here? You would probably say to me, well, it's going to be bishop c5, and black is going to go for that exchange of knights on d4, and he's eventually going to get a draw because of the opposite color bishop's nature of this position. And without having ever looked at this game, we can then see how the story unfolds. As I say, like, and there we go, and draw.
Yeah,
this is against me.
Yeah, it's an easy draw. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so now we get back. So this is preparation, the discussion, but we get back to psychology. I was so rattled by the situation here that after castle, I actually didn't even take the pawn on a7. I played e5 in about 10 seconds or 5 seconds. And then only while he was thinking, I said to myself, oh shit, that pawn on a7 was hanging. I could have taken the pawn. So the moral of the story is there is like, whenever you're caught by your opponent's threat, take a second to relax.
Yeah.
This is really, really silly.
Hey, Parmoj Destroyer, thank you for joining us. Yes, Kasparo advised to focus strongly on endgames. So that's actually a great advice. Also, great advice is to focus on tactics, which actually I have no problem studying opening lines. I actually enjoy it. My problem is that when I have to, and I promised Alex that every day I'm going to spend some time on chess tempo doing tactics, and that. Feels like having to brush your teeth or something like that. It's necessary but not enjoyable. But that's my problem. All right, so you play. I honestly, it's a perfectly natural move. I don't think it's bad.
No, it's okay, but it's actually not the best move. You're supposed to take the pawn on a7 or otherwise try and find an improvement earlier. And actually, just one final anecdote, Niels Grandelius, who is the top Swedish grandmaster, and incidentally, by the way, I'm a coach over on coachess.com, and we just launched a boot camp with Niels that is on December 5th and 6th. So go check that out. Sorry for the plug on your channel, Nicola, but
no, that's fine. Coaches.com is a very great platform for coaching, of which Alex is a big part. Please check out, and I'm going to post it in my chat. Check out coaches.com. It's a very interesting new platform for coaching. So you have there Niels Grandelius, you have there Jesse February, you have actually Polygrass is there, right? I think I saw him.
Well, any coach can be there. Yeah. Any coach can be there. But what's cool is that they're doing like group master classes type thing, which is just basically something like a private stream to a limited number of people. So you get to ask more questions, and it's like structured topics, etc. And they also have these things called boot camps. The reason it's on my mind is because there's a story now about Niels Grandelius, who's top grandmaster in Sweden. He's in the top 100 in the world. I think he's like number 76, 77. He's been as high as top 50. He's played all like so many of the world's elite, and he was playing in this Open here in Iceland. And so we're friends, and he asked me, he asked me about this game, and he had like just looked at it as he was walking by. And here I had played e5, as I'm just telling you, Nicola. That I played it out of some psychological thing, impulse. And he said to me, so how did your game go? And I said, well, I lost it. And he said, that's a pity. But, full respect to you, Alex, that you played this move e5. And I'm like, what do you mean full respect, Niels? I mean, he said, well, of course you could have just taken the pawn on a7. But I like the fact that you didn't want to go into this theoretically equal line with the opposite colored bishops. Like, it's really nice to see this kind of initiative from you.
That's a perfectly legitimate comment. That's something along the lines, obviously I'm not Niels Grandelius, but you decided you didn't want to settle for a draw.
No, but of course it would have been legitimate if that had been my actual reasoning. But my reasoning was that I was totally rattled and I didn't know the theory.
Well, but that's something and unless you share it with us, nobody else will. And e5 is a perfectly natural move. It's anyway.
Alas, I did share it, and Niels was like, "Aye, how can you not know this theory?" But it goes to show that Niels is like 2670 player. It goes to show, these guys, they are not having these kind of gaps in their knowledge. Like Niels doesn't play this line, but he simply knew it. So anyway, we eventually got to this position, and I launched some kind of an attack. And notice, by the way, that Black's strategy continues to be around the d4 square.
Yeah.
And yeah, so now in this position here, this is the next one that I want to talk about. Okay. H4, H5, B4, and bishop B6. And suddenly I was thinking, okay, I can try to attack him. I can go for some G4 or something like that. But then I thought, well, he's a 2630 grandmaster. He's 200 points higher rated than me. And I saw a variation. And variation was bishop takes a6. And I thought, maybe that is a really nice line to force off simplifications. So, Nicola, my question to you is, what do you think happens after bishop takes a6? Is it a good move? Is it a bad move? And I'll actually be right back in a minute or so.
I'll think with chat here.
Yeah, please do.
All right. It's a bad move strategically because, if the idea here is to keep the draw options open, and this is an equal position and Alex is objectively a strategically weaker player, you want to keep these opposite color bishops there. So that's number one. Number two, it's a crisscross of plans. In other words, Alex was planning to attack on the king side, and now he's switching the plan to do a little pawn grab on the queen side. Hey, and Rajvi, thank you for the follow. That's very greatly appreciated. But there probably is some tactics that I'm not seeing right now that makes this not a good move, and the reason it's a bad move is because he can take with a rook, right? And then after b5, hey Basmania, thank you for the follow. That's very, very greatly appreciated. Thank you. Let's see, what else are we missing? Rook a6, bishop a6. Let's say instead of taking with a b, we can even take with a rook, and then white can play b5. So that's another option. Okay. And yeah, queen and knight are better than queen bishop. That's probably that's true generally. All right, b5. What am I not seeing here? All right. b5, rook a3, takes, and rook a8, and then the pawn. Interesting. All right. To answer your question about the chess magazines I recommend, I actually am not terribly familiar with the chess magazines, to be quite frank with you. I received Chess Life as a member, a member of USCF. So Alex, the line I'm looking at is he takes with a rook, right? Mm-hmm. And then after you push b5, he can take on a3.
Yeah.
And then you take on c6, and okay. And then you take on c6, and then he has what? He can double the rooks.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point he can After he exchanges the pair of rooks, he can play queen c5, and he's going to end up with a pawn up.
So, okay, so
yeah,
you're saying bishop takes a6, rook takes a6, b5, rook takes a3?
Yeah. Rook takes a3, you take on c6, right? You don't have anything better. I exchange the pair of rooks.
Okay, rook takes.
And then I play queen c5.
And then you play queen c5, okay.
And then I end up being a pawn up.
Okay, and is there any way that white can avoid that? Does he have a fork in the road earlier?
I don't see it. Okay, let me think for a second. All right, so bishop a6, rook a6, b5, rook a3. He can take on a3, and that's actually fine. But what's going to end up... Yeah, okay. So the best line is bishop a6, rook a6, b5, rook a3, queen a3, bishop c6, the take on c6. Am I missing something?
No, looks good. And then how do you evaluate that position?
Hey, I'm D11506. Thank you for the follow. Greatly appreciated. Oof. All right, I can still play queen c5, right? But then the f2 pawn is defended. It appears to me that the initiative has switched to black.
Right, okay. So let's put the lines in the board that that people that you have looked at. So you were looking at bishop takes a6.
Yep.
Then rook takes a6, b5. Rook takes a3. And here, in the first instance, you consider to take on c6, and in the second to take here. The reason why you didn't quite like b takes c6 immediately is you were a bit bothered by this particular sequence here with queen c5.
Correct.
Right, because that was the double attack. So what was missed here?
Yeah, that's the $24,000 question. What am I missing?
In the meantime, I'm just going to grab my coffee. Should be ready now.
What's missed is that after cb7 here, after queen f2, it's a simple check, and I have nothing.
Yes, exactly. And so
is,
really
okay.
Nice spot for members of the chat, by the way, who picked up on this exact sequence.
Yeah.
And not only is white fine here, but white is actually white is doing great.
Yeah, white is winning. Yeah, so basically that queen f2 thing is, doesn't work. Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, you can actually play this particular sequence, but just to be clear, your suggested line of taking on a3, take on a3, b takes c6, and b takes c6, and then queen takes c6, something like this, where f2 you don't have to worry about it, is fine. Now, this is actually a trick that people don't talk about so much, like in books or whatever. You don't hear it spoken about, like other calculation or other tactics things. But one of the nice things about improving your tactics, improving your calculation, is that which variation should you play if both are equal? Which variation should you play? Should you take here first, or should you take here first? From a practical point of view, which one would be the trickier one?
I would... there is more opportunities. Having a rook on a1 is more beneficial than having a rook on rook on f1. So I will take bishop c6.
You would.
And do we have Grandmaster Jobava in chat? Well, welcome. Big shout out to James Blunder, which is Twitch name of Grandmaster Badur Jobava. Thank you for the follow. An honor to have you here. And let me make Grandmaster a VIP and give him a shout out. Thank you for joining us. We are honored. This is a lesson. This is a chess-based lesson with one and only international master Astaneh Lopez. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Dirkik, for gifting a sub to Jobava. And let's make Grandmaster a VIP. All right. Thank you. Welcome. It's an honor to have you in the chat.
Welcome, Badur. Badur is still fresh off in our last little. Still haven't recovered, Badur. Where did we play? We played Tuesday or something.
Somewhat appropriately, I think you're trying to troll Badur and your microphone is objecting, so nobody heard what you said.
I should. But Badur seems to have heard. He says that was funny game.
Okay.
I don't know if. No, I didn't feel it was that. Against Badur, but must just be my my flaw.
Oh, and 17 FYI, that's far from the biggest things when teaching me that Alex needs to be patient about. Me interactive chat is relatively minor compared to my constant inability to evaluate position properly, and I think I can keep going for about 15 minutes for various shortcomings of my game that Alex needs to put up with. So,
having said that, Nicola, I think you have your fair share to put up with. In particular, my inability to escape technical problems, honestly, are catching that as well. So I think some of my microphone is breaking up, some issues there.
Yeah, I think we're fine now.
Yeah, I do have a second connection, so I can switch to that. It's a faster upload if you want me to switch, but it might kill the camera and kill the board and all of that.
Let's stick with this for now. I think it's good. So,
all right. Actually, this one is one for Badur. Badur, for those who may not know, he is not only a very, very strong grandmaster, like 2700 grandmaster, but he's also extremely tactically sharp. So, yes. Badur, this is the question. We'll ask him if you don't mind, Nicola.
Not at all.
So in this position here, I considered the move bishop takes a6, and ultimately I rejected it. I went for rook a d1, and decided, I felt that this was roughly equal, but I decided to go for something. Actually, I felt this was roughly equal, but slightly worse for me. I decided to play rook d1, and then he went rook d8. And then I realized I had a change of heart, and I decided, yes, actually, I will go for the bishop takes a6 line. So my question to you, Badur, is what is your evaluation of bishop takes a6 here? And what is your evaluation of bishop takes a6 as played in the game here?
Okay.
No pressure.
Hey, Gatto Moderato, it's very good to see you here. Thank you for joining the stream. All right. So
Badur is in. He's writing in the chat. He is thinking.
Okay.
No pressure, says Lizzie Fair.
Yep, that's fine. Well, while Badur is thinking, I think after we know that you told us the result of this game. So after rook a d1, you lost, and I think that it would have been a fairly drawn game if you went for bishop a6. But I'm gonna.
So,
Badur is in a shock that you actually played rook fd1. So which is.
I played rook a d1. He went rook fd8. This was against Parligras. And then I took this pawn on a6. So my question is evaluation of taking the pawn first here in this position and evaluation of taking the pawn with rooks like this.
Okay.
And of course, feel free, Nicola, in the chat to try to figure out if there's a difference or if it's...
Okay. Well, the difference between the two is that pawn on a3 is now undefended, right? So taking on a3 doesn't necessarily taking on a6 with a rook and then taking on a3 doesn't necessarily result in a rook exchange. Okay, who's it benefit? All right, so Badur is saying that a bishop on f2, king f2, queen c5 ideas come into play. Okay, I see that. What else is in play?
And I just want to comment. So that's actually exceptionally instructive for the viewers and for everyone. That's actually sort of how these like top players are thinking, that they have like this vast database of little patterns. And what Badur is commenting is that when you put the rooks like this, you're going to have in some shape or form, maybe it's going to be first the exchange, or maybe it's going to be first take. You're actually going to have this possibility because the bishop is going to be on b5, and you're going to have like an undefended bishop on b5. You're going to have that rook on d1 that is sort of only defended once and attacked once. And the pawn on f2, either the rook is overloaded defending f2 and d1, or the king is going to be squeezed out towards f2 when then it can be checked. So there's a variety of move orders available, but the pattern is sort of similar.
Yeah.
And so Badur has picked up on that, and that's actually the exact point. That's the exact problem. So after rook d1, rook d8, bishop takes a6 is a losing move. And the reason is because black was able to take here on a6. My idea was b5, simplifying.
Yeah, but then there is a bishop f2, queen c5, and you cannot take with you have to take with a king. You cannot take with a rook, and therefore, yeah, that's a great motive. And one just a huge shout out to GM Hikaru with an underscore. Thank you. You are the 2,500 followers. So cool. Thank you guys. We reached the milestone. I'm actually very happy without it. And I'm going to announce there will be some special events relating to that milestone being reached. Thank you guys.
Congrats.
Okay. Yeah. And this is how the game was lost.
This is how the game was lost, yeah. Basically now the king can step away and this pawn drops. And bottom line is your king is in tatters and your pawns are terrible and you're down a pawn to boot. So it's a hopeless position against the 2630 grandmaster.
Yeah.
But notice how I didn't, sort of take my own medicine, Nicola. I mean, if you had made this mistake, I would have crucified you, right? I mean, I would have said to you, Nicola, loose pieces, pawns here. Why did you not check? Like, why did you not double and triple check this position? Because it's such a dangerous one when you're going for this kind of sequence and you've got a check available to black. You've got a loose piece here. You know, everything is very, very, very ugly. And this is the first move you check for, is a move that is both a check and a capture. And that's the only check and capture in the position. And I simply didn't check for that, and I paid the price. I saw it, but I saw it too late. I got to experience that pleasant feeling. And you see your opponent has perked up, and you know that your opponent sees it, but he's double checking. So you just have to sit there, and it's unpleasant.
Actually, the black was Mircea Parlegras. There was another game with Hammer. Alex, let me put it this way. It's I know from personal experience that it's very hard to switch to when the cleavage point of being out of prep and trying to switch from a prep to a non-prep moves. It's very hard, and God knows I actually had Grandmaster Anna Muzichuk completely dominated in opening prep, and the first two moves after being out of prep, I blundered the mate in two. So it's hard.
That is really difficult, but for me, this was lost not because of that. That was the chance missed to at least secure a relatively straightforward draw, right? If I had just taken on a7, if I take on a7 and offer him a draw, he takes it. He accepts it. Now, whether I want that or whether I want to push with white is a different story. But okay, so that's the first thing. But even still, the middle game went fine. And what I feel that I lost it for is psychology once again. I remember what happened here. I thought for ages, and then I saw this cute idea of bishop takes a6. And then I thought, you know what, let me play for more than a draw. I went rook d1, and when he quickly played rook d8, I realized actually I don't have more than a draw here. He has too quick counterplay with here. And then I said, fine, I'll just revert back to my drawish line. And the problem there was psychology as well. I should have double checked because I was thinking, I have a draw in the bag, and I don't do my checking. I don't do my homework in this updated position.
Yeah, it's a mental loss.
Yeah, it's a mental loss twice, which is really quite an upsetting one. There's one more detail. By the way, I thought I'm Homeless on Wi-Fi got this exactly right. He made a comment earlier where he said that this position here is a position where, in general, pawns on only one side of the board favor the side with the knight, or at least the knight is okay. But h4 and e5, they're on dark squares, and that favors black. So roughly speaking, it's equal. And that's exactly right. From a computer standpoint, it's 0-0-0. And the one reason I didn't play this, I think, is because not only did I want to press for more, but I felt this was a bit worse for white. So it was actually my end game understanding, or simplified middle game, cost me. So you see the importance of knowing these simple positions, these end game basics, to judge a pure middle game like this.
Hey Max, I can relate. Believe me, there is. Honestly, of all the, and I played close to, I don't know, close to 200 games in the adoption matches. That's one game that still hurts, believe it or not, because what other chance you're gonna have against a former multiple-time world champion than that one? 1950 player. But there you go. Anyway, this was very instructive, Alex.
And by the way, if we want to add to instructiveness, look at the quality of his technique. After bishop takes f2, I didn't even test king takes bishop. I went king h2 because at least I felt here, although the position is worse, I thought at least my knight might get to g5, my rook is on the open file, and I have knight against bishop, maybe something will happen. But his technique was perfect. Queen c5, defending the bishop. And then this I thought really nice. Bishop e3, hitting the queen, queen f6. And now he needs to watch out for my threats against f7, right?
Yeah.
So he wants the one thing he needs to avoid is this. So look at what he does. I thought this was really, really very cute. He goes rook a7, overprotecting f7, killing off all my knight g5 nonsense. Now I go rook d1 to create the threat of checkmate with rook d8 and rook h8. Yeah. And only then does he go rook a8. So he goes rook a7 to protect f7. When there is no longer so much pressure on f7, he now brings the rook back to a8. And then once I invade like this, he consolidates. He knows f7 is the key. He consolidates it completely, and I have no way of making further progress. I went king here, and now he just improves his queen. He starts to hunt against my own king. Here he could go something like queen f4 or bishop f4. This would be really tempting a lot of less experienced players. This would actually offer some chances to white, because suddenly the bishop is hit, the pawn is falling.
That c-pawn is the key.
Very difficult. But he, of course, protects his pawn. I go g3, centralizes his queen, and check. And now he recognizes I don't have any checks. So he goes queen c1, threatening mate on h1. And then a very nice sequence, check, queen e1, continuing to sort of shimmy the king forward, the queen forward, threatening mate on h1. And after I go here, queen e2 check, king h3. And with the queen as well placed as you can, now he creates a threat of unstoppable mate. So what was the move he played that made him resign?
Bishop g1.
Bishop g1, exactly. Yeah. Bishop g1. And it's just a beautiful game once I gave him that chance. And we see that this is how grandmasters who are very solid play when they face players like, well, of course, when they face other grandmasters, but even when they face an international master who they have a 200-point gap on, they take their chances when they get them, when they're given to them. So what happened in this game? Well, I could have gotten a draw if I had known a little more theory. And I could still have gotten a draw if my mental game was a little bit sharper, a little bit better, and I was a little less impulsive. But I failed on those 2 points. And one of those two failures would have been okay. I'm still within the drawing margin. But the 2 failures together, he took his chances. And once I make a basic mistake like this, he's going to spot it. And he's going to leave me with 0 chances to get back in the game.
And switching plans is also, like, you were trying to attack him on the king side. Then you decided you're going to go grab a pawn, then not grab a pawn, then grab a pawn after it was no longer feasible. Tough.
Yeah. And then just to give you one food for thought for you and for the chat. Think about the fact that someone like Carlsen eats guys like him for breakfast, right? And think about like how good his prep is, how solid. We're talking about a guy who's I can't find a flaw in his repertoire. And then Magnus comes along and scores like 85% with the white pieces against a guy like this, or whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but it's a pretty huge percentage score. How he does it, you'll have to ask him, right? Next lesson with Magnus, maybe.
No, the funny part is, and this is a little bit of a troll. Kitty his who incidentally introduced Alex and me. He's a great supporter of chess on Twitch. He basically said, "Why don't you play Magnus for an adoption match?" And I'm like, okay, I'll do it, but the only interesting part is how many moves I'm gonna last in each of those 10 games. I mean, it's like I subject my, it's like if he adopts 26 50 plus grandmasters, what chances do I have? So
I think you have literally 0 chance to avoid adoption.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll do it for content, but
well, you could introduce some kind of like number, like, so what is the average number of moves that he can adopt you in, right? So can he adopt you, like, and you can play till checkmate, can he adopt you with an average move number under 30 or under 35 or under 40? Is that too humiliating though?
No, I don't. Look, I'm playing adoption matches. I don't care about humiliation. I I care about chess advancement. So anyway, all right. This was a very instructive game. And funny thing is, yeah, and sorry for me saying this, but this is how I feel when I play one of those adoption matches. Actually, I'm going to talk about the match with Danny, in which I completely had. I mean, we honestly only played the openings I prepped for him, literally, and he still managed to win. First 7 games with relative ease until I was, because there is a mental aspect to chess that I'm actually glad we talked about, Alex, because you didn't lose this game on position. You lost this game on not going for knight a7.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, Nicola. I wanted to show you this game because I know that, when you think of me, you sort of think of somebody who sort of symbolizes mental toughness. But I wanted to sort of show this game. I'm kidding. That's a troll, by the way.
No, I understand it's a troll, but mental toughness is relative.
No, but actually, I think you'll see that this is a constant theme.
Yeah.
Maybe not constant theme. I think my mental toughness over the board is like just maybe average. Like it's like some people, the nerves get more to them, but the nerves get to me a lot. And I'll tell you where they get to me. They get to me when I'm playing 2,600 plus Grandmasters.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, like, I once checked the statistics on this, and my performance against 2,600 plus opponents is something like 20.
It's 200 points less. Yeah. You know where I have actually seen this, and people are gonna laugh, I watched Aryan Tari played his match against WGM Chiu Zhao, who is I think 2,300 player, and he beat her 40-0. Okay.
Wow.
I'm a big friend of both of them, and he beat her in a game in which they had a simple rook ending where he had 6 seconds and she had 35. And it's 3 pawns versus 3 pawns with all pawns being on the same wing, which is same side. With no, it was basically HGF pawn versus HGF pawn with no pawn weaknesses.
Yeah.
And a 30-second advantage. I think that's how Magnus wins a lot of games, because people just don't. It's a Magnus effect, which actually is a physical term, but it's really people expect to have to perform extraordinarily to fight with him, and then that's not enough.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you. I think that it is in significant part the Magnus effect, just because they're sitting and they know that it's Magnus. Yes. They wouldn't fall into this if they weren't aware of who their opponent was. Having said that, I think there's another element, which is Magnus, I think, and again, I know, for example, Badur is in the chat, and he is.
He just left. Thank you, Badur, for stopping by the way. Thank you. It's an honor to have you here.
So what I was going to say is that, like, there are players who have faced Magnus over the board, and they will have a more sort of refined opinion. But my feeling of it is this: Magnus came along at a time when people were actually quite focused on the openings. Mm-hmm. This was the post Kasparov era, when you had, like, Kasparov, who had been just beating up on opponents with sick prep for a very long time. And this was pre the current era, where people realized that positions, rather than trying to press for a key advantage with white, the problem is that, objectively speaking, there's 0, 0, 0 everywhere, right? So there's equality everywhere. So it's better to play a broad repertoire, and it's actually maybe more effective to work on the middle game, the practical play elements, the end game play elements. And Magnus, I think, came along and he was just super hyper focused on those things. And I think he was beating up on a lot of the top guys early on. He himself said that nowadays it's harder to sort of beat up and rack up points in the end game stages against, you know, people like MBL or Geary, etc., because those guys have worked more on that portion of the game. I think it's psychology plus Magnus's focus.
Yeah. No, it's a different. It's definitely a different game than one I used to play back in the 80s. It's the focus is different. The opening preparation is unbelievably different, and it's just the opening. When I was playing in the 80s, London system, for example, didn't exist. So
what other nice things about the 80s were there? I'm joking, by the way.
Female fashions were absolutely atrocious. One of these days I'm gonna bring my wife to the channel, and she's gonna talk about fashions of the 1980s with these huge shoulder. And anyway, that's you know, we can talk about the 80s at length. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing this with us, Alex. There are all Fractex. Thank you for the follow. Thank you, Bookto, for the follow, if I haven't said this. Oh, yes, and the hairs. Yes, female fashion, hair, aerobics, and there are all sorts of interesting things from the 1980s that, you know, anyway, the people can laugh about now.
I quite appreciate the decade and the movies and music and this and that to come out of it. But I mean, I'm born in 87, so I didn't really live the decade. So I don't know. But how do you reflect on it? I mean, in terms of like, was it a decade that you enjoyed?
Well, that was, you know, it was an interesting decade because I grew up in former Yugoslavia, and that country literally imploded in that decade. So it was a very difficult decade. Also, I don't think today people understand how big how big a menace or how big a threat or how big a challenge Soviet Union was at that time. And the threat of the nuclear war was very much alive than at that time. And also the 1980s in Britain were the time of Margaret Thatcher, so it doesn't really, it deserves a much longer answer than this. And by the way, that was time when Michael Jackson was the absolutely the most leading musician at the time when most of his great work was done. So, but anyway, fashions, and you know, I can keep going. Anyway, yeah, Rise of Kasparov. You're right. I think watching Kasparov grow from like his 1981 to playing in Bugoyno to then playing against Karpov and all those matches. That was amazing from a chess standpoint. And in 1980s, people still believe that Fischer can come back.
Crazy.
Anyway, I bored everybody to death now, so sorry.
No,
guys.
no, I find it fascinating. I'm actually like, the only thing that was slightly distracting me was that in my mind I was starting to think like, what would be really cool is some kind of like a chess educational series where you sort of, you know, track like these, like the major chess events across the different decades, starting from, let's say, the era of modern, like not modern chess, but the era where like chess became I don't know. This is again landing me in tricky territory, but in my mind, I was thinking sort of from the Fisher era or a little bit before the
Sure.
Fisher era, maybe like Tal, Spassky, this kind of thing.
Sure.
And Tal, Spassky, Fisher, and then just sort of, or even like someone a little like Petrosian, something like that.
Sure.
And then
Or
tracking
Korchnoi for that matter.
Korchnoi, yeah. From this kind of era, like I guess maybe the earliest starting point that would happen in my mind would be something like Zurich 1953, right? And track from 53 all the way to the current era that we're at, I think would be a really interesting series that should only take about 600 to 700 hours to go over. So when we
very good. We'll start on the next stream. Okay. All right. So guys, we're reminiscing here about the 80s. 80s were a different era. That's an era, incidentally, that's without cell phones, at least for a significant part. That's an era before internet. That's an era before internet chess. That's an era in which, and I keep repeating this on stream, for me to play a game against Grandmaster these days, all I need to do is to go to Chessbra channel on Sub Sunday, and as a subscriber, I'm going to get a game against Grandmaster. To get a simul game against Grandmaster Ljubomir Ljubojevic in the late 1980s, I had to play for 2 years for a chess club in which, that was the prize that I literally played, I think, about 17 games. So, the chess is a very different game. The fact that it exists online, the fact that, 1980s were time before computers, or at least without computers being anywhere near good. I remember International Master David Levy basically saying that no computer would beat him in his lifetime. And he actually succeeded until very late 80s. He played quite a lot of matches. But, it's... that's incidentally the era where personal computers came of age. It's really a different universe today. So, anyway. All right. That's all we have for today, Alex.
It would also, one last comment, and then I got to run because I've got something on in 5 minutes. So, but just one last comment, like, since you're someone who knows quite a bit about computers, it would actually be quite a nice, again, series where you could track, like you could talk about both, like the interrelationship between chess and computers, like, and sort of get into maybe the detail that I would be curious about is like, how did the first computers develop? What were the key matches played by computers? How did programmers, continually strengthen computers until they hit like this point of Stockfish 11 or whatever?
Yeah. What
happened with neural networks? Who had that idea, et cetera, et cetera? It would be very cool to hear about it. So I'll let you do all the work, Nicola, and all the presenting, and I'll tune in.
Well, I actually have a little announcement to make. I have two adoption matches lined up. One is in a week from Sunday against the Grandmaster WGM Lara Unuk of the Chiquitas. That has been long in preparation, and after that, I'm gonna play my third match against Alessia Santeramo, who gets 5 chances to adopt me in Bullet. And we already have 5 dares planned. And but I don't really have an opponent for this coming Sunday. So one thing that I'm seriously considering is I can play one of those engines and actually commentate on stream about how it's different to play against an engine at different strengths. So that's one thing I'm considering doing this Sunday. One thing that makes computers very difficult to play with is that for humans, psychology in chess is very important. I don't know how to address the psychology of Stockfish. And, rattling an opponent is really not possible with Stockfish. Or playing against an opponent is interesting. And how on earth do you prepare an opening for Stockfish? Or Bad Harmon bot over on chess.com. Anyway, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you. We reached a milestone. That's very nice to see you. There is an arena command in the chat. Next stream is next Open Field Media Arena. That's tomorrow at 9 a.m. Alex needs to go, so we're gonna send you guys to somewhere. Yes, Alex.
Sorry, Nicola. Can I just say one thing?
Of course.
So Gato Moderato in the chat, he asked about books. Where he wrote, I'd like to make my father interested in chess. He reads hundreds of books about the Cold War, so I was looking for gifting him one that can make him understand the historical importance of chess. And funnily enough, I had an email exchange with a student of mine about a month ago, and he said he really enjoyed two books. One, which I think might also be a documentary, I'm not sure, Bobby Fischer Goes to War.
Yes, that's a great book.
One. And the other one, which I had never heard of, is The Immortal Game. It's called The Immortal Game, A History of Chess by David Schenk. On Amazon, it's got a lot of rating, a lot of reviews and well reviewed. I've never read either book, disclaimer, but just a thought. The final thing is, if anybody is looking for chess lessons or something like that, and is wondering where I coach over on coachess.com. And at the moment, just today, we released a boot camp with Grandmaster Niels Grandelius, who was mentioned in this particular lesson as a little anecdote. He's Sweden's top Grandmaster. He's got a boot camp on the Ruy Lopez coming up. You can check that out on the Coachess homepage. So just wanted to get that mention in. I appreciate Nicola for tolerating me for this last hour and a half, and we'll resume next week, right?
It's been longer than an hour and a half, for the record. No, thank you, Alex. This was very instructive. And one thing about Fischer-Spassky match, and that's when I end this stream, is psychology in 1972 is extremely important, and one aspect of Fischer's huge success against Soviets is that he rattled them. You do not beat Mark Taimanov 6-0, and you don't beat Bent Larsen 6-0, and then you don't crush Tigran Petrosyan 6.5 by 2.5 without rattling the opponent. And that's one thing that I actually would like to have a stream about. All right, guys. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for the 2,500 followers. There will be a special event there. I'm sending you to Maria Yemelyanova Photo Chess, who is doing a great memorial event dedicated to the memory of Polish WM Radzikowska, and it's a great stream. It's a great chess, and Maria is a great streamer, a great friend. So give her a follow, give her a shout out, and I will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the morning. We're gonna have another Open Field Media Arena. Thank you, guys, and thank you, Alex, again. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
All right, let the right goes. Yeah. All right.
All right. We're off stream now.
Let me just mute.